Welcome back. We are starting to see the consequences from the Supreme Court's big decision on immigrants with temporary protected status. Advocates in Springfield, Ohio, say thousands of Haitian migrants are being summoned by ICE, and they're basically being told that they can either be deported on the spot or wear an ankle monitor until their deportation hearing. MS Now's Alex Tabbitt talked to a former TPS holder who now works at a Haitian support center in Springfield, and I want to play for you what he said about that choice.
This is really humiliating, but sometimes you don't have a choice, and it's a catch-22. And when you are in a catch-22, if you realize most of the people, they agree to have the ankle bracelet. In terms of humanity, this is really, really bad. Like, it's a really sad situation to describe.
Heartbreaking. DHS wouldn't confirm any ongoing operations, but a spokesperson did give us a statement. They said, quote, "It's closing time," which means you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. The good news is it's not too late to get a $2,600 check and a free flight home. I want to bring in that reporter, my colleague Alex Tabbitt, who's on the ground in Springfield, Ohio. Vaughn and Damien are still with us. Alex, can you talk about what you've been hearing from the people here that are facing this situation? I mean, they knew that change was coming, but what has it actually been like?
There's an immense amount of anxiety on the ground here, Allie. I spent much of the day yesterday inside one of the community support centers for Haitians here in Springfield. And it was busy all day with people streaming in, worried about these letters they had received. These letters that call Haitians into one of the ICE headquarters throughout the state of Ohio on very little notice and give them the difficult decision of being detained on the spot or be fitted with an ankle monitor for about a month until they can have an immigration court appearance. So the deportation proceedings here look very different to what we saw in Minneapolis, of violent detainments on the street, but these ankle monitors are leaving these people with a degree of psychological torment. Inside that building, I would hear the wails of people crying and screaming every couple of hours as they grappled with the fact that they might have to be deported to a country that has a level 4 do not travel advisory from the U.S. State Department, that the State Department says is rampant with violent crime, with terrorism that's run by gangs, that's rampant with sexual abuse. And what we also saw in that building yesterday is because so many people have been receiving this letter, the door was opening all the time, every 10, 15 minutes. And every time you could hear the door open, the dozens of Haitians in this building couldn't help but turn their heads and look towards the door, fearful of what was on the other side of that door, fearful that ICE might be around the corner. Allie.
Damien, what Tabbitt is describing there is not just heartbreaking for the people who are at the center of this, but this community of Springfield is one that we have been talking about now for almost 2 years, because it is the very same community that J.D. Vance pointed to with his whole "they're eating dogs and cats" conspiracy theory that was from the 2024 election. And it's always been a community that's been at the center of this. And it's also coming that as this administration has done more of its aggressive immigration enforcement, it's the very thing that has people, even those who voted for him, saying, "You said you'd be taking the worst of the worst, not my friends, neighbors, and colleagues who have been here trying to build a life."
I think after the shootings in Minnesota earlier this year and the ouster of Kristi Noem, a lot of people thought the Trump administration was really going to dial back. And a lot of Republicans on Capitol Hill wanted the White House to dial back its immigration approach. But the Supreme Court decision that recently occurred, and quite frankly, President Trump's own push, has re-energized the Department of Homeland Security. And there's a number of things that the department is doing. It's not just, we're not seeing the clashes like we used to on the streets as much, but there's a lot of policies being implemented in individual communities that are, quite frankly, like pretty sophisticated. And one of the things I think is going to happen before the midterm elections, when Democrats have the opportunity to take over the House or the Senate or both, the White House is going to do as much as they can to get their immigration agenda through, because there might be some actual huge roadblocks next year if Democrats have some control, and they can control the power of the purse, and they can do investigations.
You're right to talk about the policy, too, because your colleagues at the Journal have reporting around an $100,000 fee for international students that end up wanting to work in the U.S. That could lead to some kind of a brain drain as well. But I think, Vaughn, the idea that it's not just what the Journal is reporting, it's also some reporting about a new piece of the immigration agenda, this so-called Freedom Haulers initiative to replace undocumented truck drivers with military veterans. I don't think anyone is arguing that we shouldn't be helping our veterans find jobs, but I think it's important to put this through the lens of the way that the administration is doing it and the way that they are otherizing people who are here in an undocumented fashion in the process.
Right. This is sort of the immigration policy that is not always necessarily explicitly clear by the president himself. This event yesterday suggested that in order to replace the thousands of truck drivers that lost their trucking licenses because they were immigrant truck drivers, that instead the administration is going to fast track for eligible veterans commercial driver's licenses for veterans, and essentially to try to highlight that American workers can replace immigrant workers here in the United States. That's the pitch and the message coming from the president. And we have heard, especially out of this White House, J.D. Vance has been on the front lines of pushing restriction on not just undocumented immigration, but even more so on legal immigration itself. And he was the one that was pushing for a crackdown, a restriction on HB1 visas. And even to the story from the Wall Street Journal, there was the conversation last year where actually the president himself came out in defense of those South Korean nationals that were working at the Hyundai battery plant down in Georgia that were set to be sent out of the country. And he said, well, they're needed, that high-skilled workers are needed. And he acknowledged that there are high-skill industries where, whether it be recent college graduates who study in the United States or other high-skilled workers that come on those visas, that they are needed to do the work that, frankly, the American labor pool is not able to provide. And so I think for this administration, this particular event was looking at something that doesn't require a college education, for instance, not that level of high-skilled labor, and instead turning to something else where they had a crackdown on the immigration front when it came to truck driver licenses and trying to find a means to fill those roles and jobs with American veterans.
We're going to see what we see more on this front, but I think Damien is right. We're going to see the administration do a flurry of activity on this issue ahead of the midterms in advance of what might happen in those elections. Alex, Vaughn, Damien, thank you all.